Good morning. You're muted, mister.
Good morning. How's that? Is that better?
Oh, there we go. Yes, that's better. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm getting there. Working on it. Hi, Liz. Whew. My apologies. I just had this horrible coughing fit.
Oh, no.
That was an emergency I was unprepared for. Came out of nowhere. How are you this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I might have to disappear again.
Oh, no. How annoying.
I know. Dust, probably. Let's see. So you're going first, so I'm going to make you the co-host first.
Okay.
And I guess I just will keep having to switch co-hosts because I think you can only have one.
I think so, yeah. Okay. So are you going to open it up and say good morning or?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. And then
Okay.
I'll pass it off. I'll do a very brief intro and pass it off to you.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll get some people this time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
We got a few at the TikTok the other day, so that was encouraging.
The TikTok?
TikTok, climate change and ticks.
Oh, the TikTok. I'm like, wow, you guys are so with it.
No. Not that way.
I'm not even going there. There will be no library TikTok. Some others do it, not us. Well, that's good. Was that with Dick Johnson?
Yeah.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Russell.
Hi, Russ.
Let me know if this sounds better or if my headphones sound better, please. 2, 3, where's my headphones there? Let's try that.
You sound perfectly fine right now.
Do I?
I wouldn't change a thing.
Okay, then we'll take the headphones off.
Good morning, Curtis.
Morning.
Glad you're here.
Do you know Liz, Kurt?
No. She seems to know me.
No,
You know
no,
Kurt,
saying
Liz?
good morning.
Just saying good morning. I thought you might know each other.
No.
I don't think so.
Hey, Liz,
Yeah,
I had some thoughts last night. I think since Forrest is going to talk about the CERT team and Carolina is going to finish up with the kit bag idea, I think I was going to kind of try to tie the three together with a little bit of a quick talk about mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency, and how we all need to be a little bit more proactive about what we do on a personal level in terms of public safety, and see how that goes.
that's great. I'm going to give a general overview of public safety. So with some mitigation and adaptation in a broad sense, but that would be great to zero in on what each of us can do.
Okay, and since I'm after you, I'll listen to what you say, and then I'll if there's anything I didn't hear, I'll make sure I put it in.
Okay, and if there's anything I say that you disagree with, go ahead and.
Well,
say
you
it.
know I don't hold back, so that's my problem.
I actually have it with Forrest after Liz.
Oh, perfect. Okay, cool.
Then you can wrap everything up then, Russ.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Forrest, I guess, is on call, so he might have to disappear at some point. Hopefully he'll get here at some point also, but
If he does, then the only thing I wanted to talk about with the CERT stuff was the fact that we're going to put a training together this spring. I mentioned that real briefly. And so with Forrest stuff talking about Aquinnah, hopefully the idea is that we can just quickly promote the idea that people can do this themselves from more towns coming in soon if they want to try.
Yeah, that's huge. I really want to get all the towns to do that.
Yeah, it'll be great. I gotta find my notes. I'm not on island. I had to leave early, you guys. I'm trying to take the girlfriend to Andrea Bocelli, and because of the winds and sustainability issues, we left early. So I'm scrambling to stay in somebody else's house right now, finding my stuff. Okay. Next toes. Hi. You can say hi to the group. Yeah. So everybody meet somebody's cat that I don't even know yet. Hello. This is all-
Friendly.
Yep. Hey, come here, kid. You're not gonna scratch the hell out of me, are you? Okay. Deal. I'm trying, God. Caroline, did you get a sense of how many people we're gonna get? For Caroline, no, sorry.
I'm not sure. I was just saying we had a Q&A with Dick Johnson on ticks the other day, and there were about 7 or 8 people there.
Okay.
It's hard to know.
Mm-hmm. Liz, we got 5 minutes. I wanted to ask, I read that thing in the paper about the lamppost and all that fun stuff. My only question is when it comes to following regulations with the MVC, do you guys have an acting agent that can go around and check on stuff? You don't, right?
There is not, no. I think compliance has always been an issue. As far as I know, I've only been there a year, and I am not, that up to speed on those kinds of issues. But there is no one who directly that I know of addresses the compliance.
Yeah. Wow, you're
On an ongoing basis, anyway. I mean, I know when it, people.
No, for projects and grants, I'm sure that they have all that fun stuff to deal with, but yeah. Hello.
I thought I saw Lila's phone pop up, but now she's gone.
Well, we'll probably give it until about 3 or 4 after before we begin. So
Okay.
make yourself comfortable.
Hi, Forrest. Hi,
Hey,
Linda.
how you doing?
Russ, I'm gonna show you my cat.
Oh, so cute.
It looks exactly like the cat you have, Russ.
We can't
Can't
really
quite
hear
hear
you,
you,
Kurt. We can
but-
just see, we can see your cat.
She's
I think the
beautiful.
cats are taking over Zoom.
This is
Yeah.
not cool. All right, we're here to talk about public safety and how these are the rulers of the new universe.
Basically. Hi, Forrest. I'm Carolina. It's nice to meet you.
See some familiar faces as well.
Hi,
Hey,
Forrest.
Forrest. Thank you, Ken.
I see you're getting the dog in on the action, Linda. The cats can't have all the attention.
That's right. Thought it was time to speak up for dogs.
My husband is at the vet right now with one of our cats, so not here to.
You're lucky you got in because no vets are actually taking any new
Any-
clients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had cats for decades.
Hi, Allison.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Hi, Allison.
Hi. Carolina, I left a huge cardboard box by your desk.
Thank you very much.
You seemed interested in
Just
large
what I
cardboard
wanted.
boxes.
Yes, I am looking for very large boxes. Thank you.
Well, now you actually have 2 of them because it's a box within a box, and they're both
Oh,
enormous.
even better. That's like jackpot. It's the little things.
Anyone doing Christmas in Agrotown this weekend? Everyone's like,
So I was thinking about taking the kids and going and seeing if there are good light shows at night. We haven't done that yet.
You gotta go to Mr. Gatchell's house. You've done that, right?
Yes, but not yet this year.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I've never made an app before, but I am motivated to make one that tells you where in your locality the best Christmas lights are, and uses like GIS, like an interface so that you can just, map out where to go. And it
That's a
tells you
great
like
idea.
the most direct route to like get all the Christmas lights in for the season. I have no app building capability.
No aptitude.
Oh, Liz, you made my day.
That's a great idea.
We thrive on corny jokes at the library.
Hi, Josie. Another dog.
Hi, everyone.
So we'll give it just another minute or two before we begin.
Always scary when you have more presentators than, attendees.
That's a pretty serious panel here,
I'm
Russ.
an
That's true.
attendee today. I want to learn what everything you guys have to impart.
Well,
Okay.
remember too, constructively, since it's recorded,
Yeah.
we can always send this off to the Martha's Vineyard TV people, and that's been a very good resource for good conversation. So hopefully this isn't just one-off, that's all.
Yep.
We'll make it as best we can regardless of the audience.
I have to say that the fact that there are all those tornadoes in Kansas
Yeah.
really pushed me to take little time to come to this meeting.
I thought we might get a few extra after that. That was very unexpected. I guess it was for them too.
Because I've gotten tornado warnings here and I've thought, if I go in my basement, what will I do if I have to stay there? What do I have to eat? What do I have to drink? So I don't
How
know.
do you know it's safe to come out, or what do you know what's going on in other places?
Right.
Right.
All right, well, we'll go ahead and begin, and hopefully people will continue to trickle in. But good morning, everybody. I'm Carolina Cooney. I'm the programming coordinator here at the Oak Bluffs Public Library. And today we are having a talk about emergency preparedness, and specifically emergency preparedness on the island, because we are sort of our own microcosm here that does have a few different things going on than maybe anywhere else. So we have a panel of specialists here today that I'm excited to introduce. We have Elizabeth Durkee from the Martha's Vineyard Commission. She is the climate change planner. We have Forrest Filler, who is the Aquinnah CERT team member. And then we have Russ Hartenstein from the West Tisbury Emergency Management, and a few other people here that are involved with emergency management and preparedness on the island. I would like to thank, as always, the Library Friends of Oak Bluffs for sponsoring the program. And I will hand it over to Elizabeth to get us going here. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Carolina. Thank you for organizing this workshop. The Martha's Vineyard Commission is just kicked off a climate action plan process, and a big part of that is community engagement. And we've been having these monthly thematic events, and this month is Public Health and Safety Month. So this event ties into the whole climate action plan planning process for the island and Gosnold. So I have a pretty brief PowerPoint to show just kind of an overview of public safety here on the island. Can everyone see that? Okay, so climate change and public safety, a very important issue. A quick overview of our projections. We're going to be seeing higher seas, hotter weather, and more precipitation than the global average here in northeastern United States. Sea level rise projections are difficult because we don't know, how much greenhouse gas emissions we're going to be able to take care of in the future, and that depends on climate issue. Sea level rise depends on that. Also, how fast the ice sheets will melt. So these are the state intermediate projections for sea level rise. 6 inches to 1.5 feet in 10 or so years is that's pretty significant. Heat, a 2 to 5 degree rise in heat is very significant rise in the temperature here, and we need to address that in many ways. And it's going to get much, much rainier. It already has, with more rain, more precipitation, and stronger rain, which also causes more runoff and less absorption into the ground. These are the extreme weather is really the biggest public safety issue we're addressing. Stronger and more frequent storms, hurricanes, heavier rainfall, wildfire, heat, drought, and we just talked about briefly tornadoes. We had one here recently, and they just had some devastating tornadoes out west yesterday or today. Stronger and more frequent storms cause more coastal erosion and flooding. The loss of our salt marshes due to sea level rise. They have a lot of values, our salt marshes. They control flooding. They're the base of the marine food chain. We really need to look at ways that we can protect our salt marshes. Storms cause power outages, and that's an even bigger issue for people who have wells and their power is connected to their access to water. And of course, damage to people, homes, businesses, roads, infrastructure. This picture of the house and the wire and the tree was on my street in that storm we just had a couple of weeks ago. Our power was out for 4 days. Some of the things we can do to address storm issues is we can update the town floodplain bylaws to make, one thing I would like to see is no more new development in the floodplains. Excuse me. Excuse me. I'm having a rough time this morning. We need to address the infrastructure for our harbors, roads, bridges, and the ferry terminals. We need to talk about managed retreat from the coast. Are we going to raise or abandon roads on the coast as the sea rises and the storms get stronger? There are some actions we're taking at the Martha's Vineyard Commission to figure out, to help us address these issues. There's the Storm Tide Pathways Project, which is identifying where floodwater is going to go as the sea rises. And there have been 700 identified pathways on the island. So that's a little frightening, but at least we know where they are now, so we can start planning to address them. We're also doing a salt marsh migration study on Senjakantacket Pond to look at how we can allow salt marshes to migrate inland as the sea rises, when that's difficult because property and structures are in their way. There's a Storm Tide Pathways presentation as a part of Public Health and Safety Month next Friday at the Climate Action Task Force meeting, and the Zoom link is at the Island Climate Action Network website. Oh, and I just should mention too that the hospital access is a big issue. 3 of the 4 hospital access roads are in the flood zone. In a Category 4 hurricane, all 3 of those and the 4th road will be inundated. So that's a huge priority for public safety. In Hurricane Harvey, about 75% of the homes that suffered losses were outside the FEMA measured flood zones. And the FEMA flood zones don't take sea level rise into account. So it's important to think about where you're located. Are you in a flood risk area? Does your insurance cover flooding? Hurricanes are, as the water warms, are moving farther north, they're getting stronger, they're getting windier, and they're getting wetter. Just for some perspective, a last major hurricane in 1938, we had just over 5,000 residents here on the island. Today we have over 18,000, and we have 20,000 structures on the island. All of those structures are at risk of damage in a major hurricane. Supply chain disruptions are an issue, storm-related injury and death, economic losses. So we need to plan. One thing I really hope to do as a part of the climate action plan is to develop a post-disaster recovery plan. So we're not scrambling after a hurricane. We know what to do, where we should rebuild to be safe and to protect the public health and safety. Some actions we can take during the community resilience workshops we all had in all the island towns in 2019, there was discussion of an island-wide emergency manager position. And I believe all the towns approved that funding for that position at their town meetings this year. We need to address vulnerable populations, the elderly, the non-English speaking, the isolated. I know Russell's talked before about the need for people to sign up for the Code Red alerts. Forrest is going to talk about community emergency response teams, which Aquinnah has, and I think all the towns really need to have. The commission is doing a supply chain study, and the Martha's Vineyard Commission just updated their Dukes County Hazard Mitigation Plan, which has a lot of good information about public safety. Heavier precipitation. This is a street in my neighborhood, causes more inland flooding, mold in basements and respiratory illness, property damage. There's a lot of things we can do about this. We can develop bioswales, which are naturally vegetated stormwater capture. We can look at the ideas of using parks as retention basins during storms. We can all look at using less hard surface on our property because the rain falls on the hard surfaces and the runoff enters our ponds with pollutants in it. So we could use, you know, shells or some sort of thing for driveways instead of hard surfaces. And there's something called permeable pavement, which is actually pavement that allows water to absorb through it. So all of these things will be looked at for the climate action plan. Wildfire is a big threat here on the island, not just out west. We're going to be having increased drought. There was a grant that the town of Edgartown and the commission got to develop a community wildfire protection plan, and that's been completed. And there's going to be a Q&A on that wildfire protection plan coming up December 15th as a part of Public Health and Safety Month. And the Zoom link for that is also on the ICANN website. Extreme heat is going to be a big concern. A lot of health issues concerned with heat, respiratory illnesses, cardiovascular disease, more tick and vector-borne diseases, risks to outdoor workers, bacteria, food poisoning, all of these things we need to start addressing. Heat kills more people than any other weather event, which surprised me to hear that, although I think I just read somewhere that flooding is catching up or maybe even overtaking that as the extreme weather event that's taking more lives. Some things we can do about heat and health: talk to your doctors about concerns you have, plant trees for shade. I wonder if we have enough respiratory and mental health professionals on the island. Complementary medicine has some great chiropractic care, and acupuncture can address things like some of the symptoms of Lyme disease and respiratory issues. We can look into having more cooling centers on the island, and certainly, as we have been for a while, looking at ways to manage ticks here on the island. Drought is another issue. Summer droughts or wildfire hazard, they affect agriculture. We need to protect our fresh water supply. And, you know, we did just have a tornado warning here, and we may be getting more. So we need to look at, you know, I don't think we know really anything about how to deal with tornadoes because they've never really been an issue here. So we need to learn what to do before, during, and after tornadoes. At the Martha's Vineyard Commission, we've developed a climate action task force. Some of the things we're doing, we have a climate resilience committee. We've gotten funding to do the climate action plan, which will be addressing public health and safety. The climate action task force is looking into a whole lot of political, regional collaboration, working with the Steamship Authority on electrification of ferries. And we're looking at a lot of energy and renewable energy related issues as well. Just a brief overview of the climate action plan. We've divided it into 6 thematic working groups that we're looking at. Public health and safety is one. We're looking at land use and natural resources, infrastructure and transportation, which also relates to public safety, food security also, economic resilience, and energy transformation. I recommend this book to anyone who's interested in learning everything you can possibly learn about preparing for climate change. It's a really wonderful guide. It addresses everything you could possibly think of for preparing for the impacts that we're going to be seeing. And my final message, stop burning fossil fuels and move to higher ground, is kind of all of it in a nutshell. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them either now or perhaps at the end of this workshop, so we can move on to hear Forrest next, I believe.
Well, thank you very, very much, Liz. That was really intense. And I think seeing all those pictures that were of the island made it hit home even more. I mean, there's a lot that's gone on just recently. I would welcome questions now if anybody has something pressing. Otherwise, we can move on to Forrest. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like it to address immediately?
Liz, you did a great sort of preface about what the MVC is doing in general as far as studies go. Can you maybe describe real quickly this approach that you have for the climate studies that you're doing in community groups all winter long, and maybe describe what we're doing here today?
Yeah, well, you mean the climate action plan?
Well, what I'm thinking is that we're kicking off today something of a series that's going on all winter. And maybe we should describe to the people outside what's going to happen in the future of what's coming up.
Gotcha. Good idea. Thank you. Yes, we took the Climate Action Plan group took these 6 thematic areas that we're addressing in the Climate Action Plan, and we have assigned a month to each one. November was Food Security Month. December is Public Health and Safety. January is Land Use and Natural Resources, and so on. And we're having 4 or 5 events each month addressing these particular issues, including this event. And tomorrow, the Protect Your Environment and Mass Audubon, Felix Neck, are hosting a Public Health and Safety Climate Cafe at Rosewater in Edgartown at 10 a.m., which the students run, which is very interesting. It's very exciting to have the youth involved in this. And all of this is going to culminate in Climate Week in May, from May 18th to the 14th, which is a week-long community awareness event where we're going to be having activities everywhere, businesses, organizations, libraries, museums, everyone on the island. We're hoping to get involved in having events to promote community awareness and understanding of the issues, and to also talk about the results that we've accumulated by that time with the climate action planning process. So this is a kind of a 6-month process, and it's very exciting. I'm so excited that we're taking this on here on the island, and we have over 100 community members involved in the climate action planning process. So it's a very community-based process.
Well, that is fantastic, Liz. Thank you so much. It's just a lot of great information, and I'm looking forward to all these programs that are coming up, and we'll definitely be promoting those through the library as well. I'm going to now turn it over to Forrest. You're in the spotlight now, Forrest. Go ahead and take it away. Thank you.
Can everyone hear me all right? Okay, great. Yeah, so first of all, it's nice to see a lot of people from different groups which are related. Obviously, you know, emergency management and climate change and CERT teams and many other topics kind of are so interrelated. So it's good to have a panel together. The CERT team in Aquinnah is a great group of different stakeholders, people who live in town, people who don't live in town, municipal officials, tribal officials, tribal members. And it's been a great collaboration to provide training and support to the first responders in town, in the sense that if you're able to take care of yourself and your family, you're not putting a burden on the police, fire, and EMS wherever possible. So we also try and do things like staff our warming and cooling, charging shelter at the old town hall, and in conjunction with the Red Cross, the CERT team provides has not yet had a need to, but would provide staffing for the overnight shelter at the tribal community center. So it's a pretty impressive group of people, diverse backgrounds, and you know, it's just a really great community effort. That I'm also the emergency manager for the town of Aquinnah, and so I just try and support our group, and you know, try and manage some of our communication efforts as well. I don't really know. There's not too much more to say, except I know Russ is working hard in West Tisbury and has been working on spinning up a group there, I believe. And really every town should do so, because when you have people in the town who can know how to take care of themselves, what to do with, you know, first aid and basic fire, when to call for help, things like that, it makes a big difference in reducing call volume for first responders. Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, we've done a lot of collaboration with the commission, you know, with the wildfire plan, as well as other things. We're interested in what we can do to create defensible spaces around homes to reduce, you know, losses from fires, and what could be done from reviewing town bylaws with regard to tree clearing, what's allowed, what's not allowed, how that jives with the science that Liz and her team have worked on. And many other avenues. We take advantage of the GIS mapping that the commission supports through Chris Seidel and their group, and Dan Doyle, to kind of map some of the people in our community who need to be checked in on for reasons like they are alone, they're our elders or otherwise, or have medical devices, coordinate with Eversource to make sure we get things prioritized as far as ensuring medical devices in the homes are powered more quickly. So that GIS capability has been very helpful for us to basically split the town into quadrants and have sort of team captains, if you will, of community leaders who can keep an eye on their neighbors. So it's a really great community initiative. And I hope that all the other towns think about it. I mean, like everything, regionalization is always sort of a dirty word, but doesn't need to be. So if everybody works together, I mean, there's no reason why Aquinnah CERT members can't be helping people on Chappie or otherwise. So we're always welcoming, people to join or for us to help others. So that's pretty much it. So.
Well, thank you so much. I had a few questions. I'm curious if Aquinnah kind of has its own sort of plan, because it is, it's up there for a lot of us. And it does seem almost to be its own sort of thing that's going on out there. Does it have kind of a different plan than the rest of the island, or more extensive planning?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, really for us up island, I mean, particularly in Aquinnah, that was what precipitated the interest in town in starting up a CERT team, was realizing that if Harris Creek, if we lose that bridge there because of climate change or flooding or high tides mixed with lunar cycle and otherwise, we're cut off. And so making sure we have capabilities to provide for ourselves up there until someone's able to come. And really, if there's a large scale disaster, I mean, Russ knows this very well, like, if we're having a big problem here, probably the Cape's having the same problem, and probably they're in front of us as far as resources getting here. So we're just trying to be as self-sufficient as possible through the lens of your question. Yeah.
I was also curious, you were mentioning GIS. Is that some sort of geological survey? I'm not familiar with what that is.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'll take a stab at answering this before Liz takes over. But basically, GIS is a type of, it's a mapping software that's very powerful that you can use, that the commission, I think, has a grant to provide, or maybe the towns pay to the commission or vice versa, to provide support software and a cartographer, which is what Chris is really. I don't know, do you want to take over, Liz, as I butcher the explanation?
No, I don't know a whole lot more about it. I think, isn't it Geographic Information Services?
Yeah.
I think is what it stands for. And Chris Seidel is the GIS specialist at the commission, and she's amazing with maps, and she's always willing to help all the towns with any type of mapping needed for anything, including climate change and emergency preparedness issues.
Yeah, and if I could chime in really quickly, that we're finding in emergency management that capability is really helping us assess and figure out what the plans need to be. We're seeing that because things are rapidly changing so quick, that mapping is really helping us visually see, and it's kind of, well, slightly terrifying to see what the impacts are going to be.
Yes, so for your information, Caroline, definitely look up GIS, ArcGIS. It's an interesting thing if you want to learn more about it. And I'm not sure what the rules are for participation and support through the commission, but I know that the municipal account holders are probably allowed to get a web account. So if that's something that the library wants to do, I'm sure they could coordinate with the commission or their town administrator.
Very interesting. I was also wondering, you mentioned about clearing around homes for fire safety. Can you talk a little more about that and what that would incur?
So I'll take another stab at this. Sorry, Liz, in advance. So basically, this really impressive report that Liz mentioned in her presentation, where the MVC in Edgartown won a grant to do this island-wide research about what we need to be doing to prepare for wildland fires, and for different recommendations by town is really specific, and it's available. It's definitely worth checking out. I said defensible space is basically the premise is sort of that there's different zones, if you can imagine 3 like donuts or whatever around your house, and then like the first 30 feet, say from the physical structure of your home out, is like, you do certain things there. Then the second intermediary zone, you have a different level. It's almost like it is forestry. I mean, it's really like a managed forest you're creating in your property, and out to a certain distance to reduce the intensity, heat, and destructive power of wildland fires. It's also, it's easier when you have a lot of property. And if you have a small property, if you're on quarter acre or less, it's pretty hard to do that. If you're a renter, you may not have those options, but if you're someone who owns a little bit of property, you'll be able to do that.
There is a great, on the West Tisbury, Town of West Tisbury website has a great list. It breaks down the areas, you know, from your house and what you should do in each area to prepare for wildfires.
And with
Another-
wildfire, oh, sorry, is it the same sort of system for warnings? Like the phone would start making horrible noises and we know that a wildfire is coming? Or what is the system for alerting people of wildfire near their home? Is there a system?
Forrest appears frozen, so I'll take a stab at that so that we have a proper response. We have a couple of different ways of getting in touch with the public at this point in time. One is the Code Red, which is an electable response system. You have to sign in via your town websites to the Code Red system, and we will reach you in case of an immediate emergency. If it's such that the island as a whole has a problem rather than a specific town or an incident that may be regional that we could use with Code Red, we do have the capability of working with FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, as well as MEMA, the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. And through them and the Sheriff's Department, we're allowed to contact them for emergencies and then actually override your phones in the most emergency-based scenarios. And so yes, your phone on all levels would probably get a call, but that would be for a really, really horrific thing. And it may not even be for the wildfire that you're describing. That would probably be a Code Red blast. And then we also encourage everybody, as usual, to pay attention because they have their phones to social media. So it's the de facto becomes social media sites like your police websites and Facebook post sites, as well as even things like Islanders Talk, which can get word around very quickly. We do promote that as well.
I'm sorry about, I didn't mean to, I had an internet problem. Maybe Russ, when you are talking about emergency management, you could talk about some of those memorandum of agreements with like WMVY and things like that, or ability to reach out to the MEMA dispatch to issue alerts, things like that.
Forrest, thank you. I did neglect to mention that we do have really great communications with radio stations here too. So that's the one, but I did talk about FEMA and MEMA, yeah.
All right, well, thank you so much, Forrest. We will go ahead and move now on to Russ. And let me find you here, Russ.
Hi,
right.
I guess I'm there. So hi, my name is Russ Hartenstein. I'm the West Tisbury Emergency Manager. I'm also the Regional Emergency Management Public Information Officer. And what we try to do there is help as best we can to inform as best we can with various scenarios, whether they be immediate need, long-term need, or future planning. And we are a rapidly expanding organization that's really trying hard to figure out the best way to communicate what is a really growing topic on the vineyard across the country. When I think of what we're doing here today in terms of public safety, I wanted to really talk about the three major categories that we think about what's happening in our environment now, and in the subtext of the final fourth category. And what I mean by that is we have three main terms that we talk about right now, which is mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency. And all of these three terms really permeate our lives right now if we're trying to think critically about the future. And at this point in time, I think it's really important to focus with public safety. What does that mean? How does mitigation, adaptation, and resiliency actually work for public safety? What does that do? What does that mean? And what is the goal? And that's what I talk about the fourth term, which is sustainability. We are trying to figure out a way to sustain our lives, our livelihoods, and our daily functioning. That's what we're trying to figure out. Our goal is sustainability. We are now in an era of change, and we need to figure out what we can do. So step one, mitigation. And what does that mean for citizens and volunteers? So if we could take a quick break to think about what the definition of mitigation is, there's a really important word there that comes right to mind in the definition. The definition of mitigation is the action of reducing the severity of something, the severity of something, or the seriousness of it, or the pain. But it's the action that makes mitigation work. Action is what we are required to do to mitigate something. It does not happen from other forces. And so in public safety, mitigation for us is action, but what kind of action? Public safety volunteers, public safety citizens. I think the action we're talking about is help, whether it be through volunteer help, response as a volunteer firefighter, whatever kind of help we can come up with. As a citizen, that help means preparedness, learning what your factors are in your environment that's going to make you more resilient and then actually make you more independent so that you don't become part of the problem, you become part of the solution. What we know in public safety now with the amount of severity of storms and an increase is we're also seeing a huge drastic drop in volunteerism. And that is an exact almost reaction to the fact that we have to work harder and more independently in our lives than ever before to afford our livelihoods. That response, though, of losing volunteers is creating a bigger gap now that we're now actually forced to think more about how we can be independent in certain circumstances without that volunteerism help. I ask you all who are here today to think about how you can volunteer, how you can help. And if you can't help, you should think about how you should help yourself. So what does that mean in the second step? Adaptation. We have to learn how to adapt. If we commit to mitigation, if we commit to an action, then we have to commit to adaptation and learning what the action or process of becoming better suited to our environment. That is the definition of adaptation. So to volunteers and citizens, learn to help, learn to prepare. So we need to, as we just discussed with your properties, learn about the donuts and safeties for mitigation of wildfire. We need to learn more about what we can prepare for on our own in certain storms and how to get, like we're going to learn about in a little bit, go bags in case we have to go. What about 5 days worth of food? We have to learn the things that we need to prepare for, and therefore we can start to mitigate our world around us. We are going to become tough, and that's our goal. So the third part of that is resiliency. And I really like this definition of resiliency, the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness. It's the capacity to recover quickly in public safety. So for example, right now we're seeing these horrific tornadoes. What are they doing? They're responding quickly. They're trying to assess quickly. They're trying to do everything so that we can get back to two things. One, saving lives in a fastest manner, and two, getting back to normalcy. Resiliency is not building a better building. It's building a better infrastructure that's going to support that building when the building becomes weak. It's going to be becoming a support structure that's going to build a stronger community when the community has a weakness and it needs to be dammed up. Resiliency is becoming tough as a community. And as a volunteer or as a citizen, that means training, and that means learning to prepare on an active basis. Resiliency is really us all deciding that we make an action and we stick to it and we stay committed to our communities, and we work now in perpetuity together. We cannot back down. We have to stay tough. If we do all three of these things, mitigate, adapt, and become resilient, then our goal of sustainability on this island is actualized. Sustainability in every facility I can possibly think of, from building construction to road construction to community construction. We have got to think in the terms of sustainability with those three main principles, and then we will truly create a really strong and resolute community that we can rely on. I'd like to finish up this part of the talk to say that we in West Tisbury, thanks to the Climate Action Committee, thanks to the MVC, thanks to so many other people, we are really trying, and in inspiration from Aquinnah, trying to find ways of making that CERT team, which stands for Citizens Emergency Response Team. We need more volunteers. We have to promote this Citizens Emergency Response Team, not just isolated communities like Aquinnah. Also, Chilmark is really looking into, or I'm sorry, not Chilmark, but Chappaquiddick is also eagerly looking into this, because they know that they're really on the worst scale of this. But if we look long-term, we are all on the same scale. So the complications become, how can we develop a CERT team for each town? How can we establish town leaders that will help communicate and train so that we have phones and trees that go on like Aquinnah does, resources that have people trained in basic first aid, people that can help you, inform you on how to make your landscaping better so that wildfires come, it will be more prepared. We want to do that for you this winter. And the emergency managers have asked me to take what I've trained for West Tisbury and offer it to the island. And so basically from March and April and May, we're going to offer a 3-class, a 6-part study of emergency management and the basics of preparation, sheltering, and volunteering support. What I'd like to do with that 3-month program in 2 months, 2 meetings a month with 2 weeks apart, is 1 Zoom meeting and 1 practical meeting. And in each Zoom meeting, we'll discuss a breakdown in systems from anything from introduction to emergency management to ways to prepare for emergencies or different volunteering ways. And then from the other side of that, we'll go to a practical where we can set up, hopefully, and train some more people to sign up for Code Red and do a blast there, create a phone networks, look at these go bags that we're about to talk about, and even go around to some other homes and look at how we can create checklists for wildfire prevention and look at power resiliency and what our homes need. I really hope that if we can create more awareness and more volunteerism on this island, we'll actually see this climate action committee and climate work groups come together, and everybody can start to see how we all are knit, how we all can mesh, and how when these things happen, which are going to happen more and more and more, we're going to see more and more people showing up to help and not less. Thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you very much, Russ. And I guess does anybody have any questions before we move on?
Yeah, I have a question kind of based on what you just said, Russ, and what Forrest said. I think this question is probably for Forrest, actually. What are some of the things that the Aquinnah CERT team has been trained to do?
Yes, can you hear me okay? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the CERT team's been trained to do in the use of fire extinguishers. We've done mass casualty incident medical training under our previous emergency manager, Gary Robinson. Let's see, we've done some first aid CPR certifications. And one of our working groups is a sheltering working group where we've developed a sheltering team to first aid, Red Cross basic shelter training and feeding fundamental training to staff shelters. So we're all certified in that to support the tribal shelter. So that's where we are. That's what we've been doing.
That's fantastic. I really, really hope that all the towns do that. It's really a great program. Thank you. And
Yeah,
thank you,
like
Russ. Your training is very exciting.
Thanks. A quick side note to what Forrest said. What's really encouraging about Aquinnah is that it's a very small community there, and there's actually a large percentage of people who are volunteering there. It's really astounding. That means that there's a good support system for that population. If we look at the rest of the island right now, we have one collective shelter that we're going to use in a major disaster, and that's going to be the Oak Bluffs School. That only can house 300 people. And currently we have an effective force of about 20 to 25 possible volunteers for that shelter. If we really look at that on a large term scale, we need a lot more support for a community that has 20,000 people in it at any given time. We really need to think constructively about how we can get more CERT teams, more volunteerism, and really look at holistically helping the community as a whole.
And more shelters.
And more shelters. Yeah, well, there's the rub. In about 8 years ago, we did a study. I was part of that when I first became assistant emergency manager. FEMA came, and we did a lot of looking around all the different shelters on the island, because currently we were using the Tisbury School, which is a 100-year-old building. We don't want to go into that story, but we were looking at other effective shelter spaces. When you think about all the different categories that you need for whether you're talking about individuals that need special needs, handicaps, or even we are now required by law to take pets. And it's really important to let people know that we want to take pets. We want people to come. And so we even have to have places to house animals. When we did all of those studies to look at where those things would be feasibly done, there was only really 1 or 2 buildings on this island that could actually do that. The high school and the Oak Bluff School. Almost every other building did not suit those categories. So when we say, oh, let's just create new shelters, we're talking about creating new buildings. We have to think again about a new future and design and create sustainability across the board. And we have yet to even accomplish that.
So that's actually something I was curious about as well. So West Tisbury doesn't have its own emergency shelter, like we wouldn't go to the school or something like that. If
No, we don't have enough volunteers to actually even staff one, nor do we have a really building that could house something for long term. What we continually do on the island is we think about resiliency as far as collectively working together, and that's the regionalization talk. So West Tisbury we do offer cold and warming shelters for blizzards and minor incidents, but if it's a holistically large incident, then we're going to all try to work on together the problem. And that's when you're going to start to see one major regional thing. Also, we should talk about the fact that how long can we support something like that with such a weak volunteer system? We have a mass evacuation plan, but again, I can talk to you about how almost questionably useless that is, because once we evacuate to the Cape, we're stuck by 2 bridges and tens of thousands of people trying to get off to those bridges. We have to realize on Martha's Vineyard, we are a connection to a connection to a connection, and we are stuck here. And the shelter that we have is really our home and our neighborhoods, and how we can go from our house to our next door neighbor's house. And from there, we're going to have to learn how to rebuild if we're stuck.
Well, very interesting and pretty intense too. So now, unless anybody has any other questions, I will start going into how to create an emergency kit, which, does anybody have any other questions? No, okay. So this was my first attempt to make an emergency kit, was for this program. And it's actually quite challenging and quite expensive, is what I have run into. So I think the best advice for creating an emergency kit is to actually start as soon as you can. Don't feel like you need to get everything all at once and be overwhelmed by that. Just start getting things and putting the kit together as you're able to, and then at least you do have something. So I'm going to show you my kit here. It's actually kind of heavy, so I'm gonna have to stand up to get it. So my emergency kit, I got a big sturdy Tupperware that closes and can be waterproof. And I just started to fill it with things that I thought would be helpful. And I started working from the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency. So that's MEMA, their suggested emergency kit checklist. There are a million emergency kit checklists out there. You can just search for emergency kit checklist and you'll find a ton of them. Some of them have differing information, but they're mostly the same. And then I did find a few things for myself that I thought would be helpful to add to the list, just because of personal preference or things that I actually thought would be helpful to have. So one of the first things I got was this handy radio. This is a crank radio. So it does not require batteries, because batteries are one of the things I found is something you really should have a lot of in your emergency kit. And batteries can be quite expensive because a lot of things do take batteries. But luckily with this emergency radio, it does not need batteries per se. It also is this amazing multi-kit that has a flashlight, a spotlight. It has the emergency radio that is also a weather radio, so it gets the weather band as well. So I had my first experience, and it charges solar. I haven't tested that aspect of it out, but it can do that also. I had my first experience using this when we had the big storm and the power went out at my house for about 36 hours, which seemed like forever. So it was really only one overnight, but it seemed like it was very, very long. And, it really got me into the mode of, the survivalist mode, and gave me the opportunity to use my kit and things in the kit and see what would be good to have in the kit should it have been a longer emergency. So this in particular, I did try to use, but I didn't find it all that helpful. And maybe some people can chime in, because I tried to use the weather radio and I couldn't find something that I felt was local enough. Like everything was a little broad. It was just for the Cape. I really wanted information just about the island and what was happening on the island. And I guess you can get the local radio station, but I couldn't find that on here. For some reason, I was never able to get that in. So next time, yes, Forrest.
We're between channel 1 and channel 2. Channel 1, which is 162.550 megahertz, will cover Dukes County, and it's coming. We're in the Boston Norton forecast area, but they'll basically it's really like a marine weather kind of radio in a sense, and you can just listen to that and it just plays on repeat. If you have a VHF marine radio, you can also many times also pick up channel 1. It just depends, like one part of the island is this, the other part is better reception. So channel 1 and channel 2, but generally 162.550 takes is best.
550.
And Carolina, I love the fact that what you're saying is that you did some research and then you found yourself in a scenario and then you acted it out. What I'm hearing, which is really cool and interesting at the same time, is we need to remind everybody, training. Once you buy something, don't just put it in the box.
Yes.
Use it, figure it out, right? You assumed, right, that this is going to solve all the problems in the world, and you put it in the box and like, I got it. But what we do often enough is we don't actually look at it, train with it, or practice with it. And that's
or read
really
the instructions.
Exactly. So the great thing that you're doing right now with this kit, and I love it, is that you've actually talked about what you did and what you're trying to use. But I think to the public, they should really hear, don't just put it in the box. Practice with this stuff before you put it in the box and know what it's going to be, so that when you're ready to rely on it, you have an actual use for it and not an idea.
I actually think that's one of the biggest problems that we're up against with the general population is complacency. We get these tornado warnings. Your phone is making this horrible noise. You're like, should I really go down in the basement? I don't know. Is this really that serious? And you know what? Most people aren't. Most people don't go down in the basement and follow the rules of what they're telling you to do. They just think it's not going to happen here. And then it doesn't happen. And it kind of reinforces that feeling like, oh, there's this alert, but nothing happened last time. So why should I go down in the basement and sit in the basement for 3 hours? I did go down in the basement and sit in the basement.
As a volunteer firefighter, what we've learned over a long period of time, and Forrest, I know you do it too, we go every Sunday and we do our radio checks. We do the most boring, mundane stuff on a routine basis, and it creates a consistency that we know we can follow up on. We may not enjoy it, we don't often like it, but it's become routine. And therefore, when it becomes routine, we can count on it when we need it for emergencies. If we don't make it routine, you can't count on anything in an emergency. So once you put that box together, if you abandon it and don't look at it, you might really regret that, because you're relying on something that may not be available or effective at all.
And the same with these emergency warnings that we get. One time it's going to be for real. So what's it's not that difficult to go down and be in your basement for a few hours, grab some blankets, make it fun. I have 2 children and I got them out of bed and dragged them down into the basement, and it was a good time. So another thing that I have here in my kit, I have masks, which are a new thing kind of to make sure you have in your kit, but definitely good to have some masks on hand should you need them.
We do have pandemics. That's what they're
Yes.
called. Good job.
Exactly. The food part was one of the hardest aspects of it for me, especially because you're supposed to check the food and replace it every 6 months, 8 months to a year. I think that's going to be very difficult for me. And I definitely, unless for some reason they get used, I see my canned goods sitting in there for years, which hopefully that'll be okay and it'll be something. I don't know. I guess you have to sort of set a reminder for yourself to go through it and replace the food. But I think that's one of the toughest aspects for me. I, of course, have multiple flashlights, pretty much as many as I could put in there. Here's another windable flashlight with the crank. I did put in some of these sort of camping propane tanks. And I also have one of the sort of camping propane grills, which I'm not putting in the kit, but I do have it. So hopefully if I needed it, I could access it.
Carolina, can I ask you a question about that?
In the kit. Yes.
If you have a stove, have you thought about where you're going to put it so you don't have any ventilation issues or any fire issues?
Also a good point. Yeah, definitely.
Please don't expect to put a can stove in a house and then go for it, right?
Do not do that. Definitely do not do that. Luckily, I do have a propane stove at my house, so that what came in very handy. Make sure you have a lighter in your kit or a clicker or both, matches potentially.
I'd like to extend that warning seriously for generators too. People often think that generators are a great solution, and we hear a lot about carbon monoxide poisoning when they're not done correctly. So we've got to be very, very careful about those things, again, that we think are safe, but how do we use them safely? Make sure you have a good plan.
One thing I came up against with the most recent storm was that I thought of a lot of things, but I didn't think about not having water for the house, just wastewater to use just for flushing the toilet or for, anything you might need. So I ended up having a bucket outside where I was trying to collect the water because I did not fill up my bathtub like you really should do. It's something I don't know if a lot of people really know to do anymore, or that people do in an emergency, or, that's another one of those things you don't think about until it's too late often.
I had somebody do that and then tell me afterwards they didn't realize their tub stopper leaked and they left with no water. So again, they didn't prepare in a way to plan. And with that one was kind of funny because they thought about one plan, but they forgot to actually do it. And they found out the next morning it wasn't a very good plan.
They must not take a lot of baths.
Sorry, it's Forrest. I just want to say we had a lot of people come into the Aquinnah town hall to get water. They would come because we had a generator at town hall, so they would fill up a bunch of jugs so they could bring it home, either water to drink or water to flush toilets. So that was another important thing that the municipal buildings were serving, or actually I think probably in other towns as well.
If people are watching to wonder how much water and to prepare for in a good way, 1 gallon of water for drinking and 5 gallons of water for waste is a good idea per person. So if you have 3 people in a house, 15 gallons of wastewater, 3 gallons of drinking water on a daily basis means you can stay clean and hydrated. That's a lot of water.
That's so much water. And I still am struggling with how to actually achieve that, because just having the water bottles, that plastic does break down over time. I used to have a water jug in the basement and it leaked. So there was my emergency water gone. And that's so much water. I just don't know how that's feasible.
Okay, so this is a good question. Think about carrying around collapsible water bags in your go kit, because therefore we have public water dispensing units out. Yep, there you go. So Aquinas is open, West Tisbury has a place. You'll be able to go get water, but how are you going to carry it back and forth? Good plan.
Yeah. So that is good to know, because I wasn't aware that there was anywhere to get water.
Yeah. And that's actually, thank you very much for telling us. Forrest, we should make a note that next time we have 36 hours, we got to let people know where the public safety water supplies are. Basically, it's most town buildings that have one and guarantee it for safety, because we realize most up island towns do not have a public water supply. Almost everybody in up island town is on a well, private well. And that's our problem. Down island, Oak Bluffs, Edgartown, Vineyard Haven, most of those are on a public supply. So that's a different issue that they have during power outages.
Which is something I didn't even realize until I spoke with somebody else about how they had water the whole time because they're on town water. I live in West Tisbury, which is why a lot of my questions are about West Tisbury. And so I have a private well and had no water. So this is what we were talking about. This is the collapsible water bag. This one is fantastic. It's Sawyer. It's a 1 gallon water bag, and it has different ways you can fill it up. You can fill it here with actually just even kind of runoff or any kind of water. And then it has a built-in filtration system, a mini water filter on it that the water will run through and actually turn, any kind of water into potable, drinkable water. So I thought this was just fantastic. It was not that expensive, doesn't take up that much room, and hopefully will be a good solution in times that you need that much water. Let's see. I also have some gloves, just in case. They definitely come in handy. Especially, I noticed I needed gloves quite a bit during the last emergency that we had, because there wasn't that much water to wash my hands. And so
Yeah.
I was using the gloves more often to do a lot of the nastier tasks that I had to do. You do want to
two
have,
children.
pardon?
You have 2 children.
Yes, exactly. I also see, speaking of, this is the biggest challenge that I ran into. I have a nice emergency kit that I put together. Guess who finds the kit and takes stuff out of the kit and uses it all? And it doesn't always end up back in there. So that's actually one of the biggest challenges I've run up against as well, is I'm like trying to retrieve my emergency kit things that have been taken out and used for non-emergencies.
But
And
very
getting them
interesting, the
back in
fact
here.
that the kids can get involved and always learn more. And yeah, actually, we should talk real quickly. Remember that there are programs and there are kit bags for kids too, to
Yes.
think about what they might need.
Indeed. And there's actually a very cute resource. I'm not sure if I printed that one out. I think it's on, it might be on the Red Cross website.
That one,
That-
yeah, the
That
pillowcase
it's
pack.
very geared towards children and is done in a nice way that is not too fear-inducing, which is always good too. Headlamps, I find, are invaluable during emergencies. You really want to have both hands free for a lot of things. I did get to see, this is one of the things that is not in here currently. I got a solar charger, and we talk a lot about how your phone is a resource and a method of communication, but your phone runs out of battery. And so what are we going to do then when there's no electricity? Your phone's dead. You don't have a landline anymore. I don't know. I mean, that one
So,
is still like
Okay, so
neighbors.
that Vineyard Haven during the storm, they actually opened up a potable water and power storage station during a long-term power outage. I think your towns will see that as a major issue for information as well as everything else. We're going to have to acknowledge that people need low voltage power. I own, and I can suggest also, they make these wonderful little battery backup batteries that can hold up to 40. They're not inexpensive, but charging those and keeping those around are incredibly valuable, because you can plug that into your Wi-Fi in your house. And if you have that, most people don't realize that Wi-Fi is simply just a 110 plug that you lose power for. And all you need to do is plug your router in and your home goes lit like that. And all that, if you have that battery station, your house will have most of its Wi-Fi running for a good 24, 36 hours and not even know it. That doesn't help with heat, doesn't help with water. But if you feel like information is really key to your sanity, get a battery backup.
And it often is. If you feel isolated, having some sort of line to what's going on out there is huge.
Now, I would like to say, Carolina, one thing with your pack that I see a lot of batteries. I'd like you to put a reminder in your phone for once a month, check your batteries, take them out of your flashlights, take them out, or they will end up damaged, corroded, and they will be worthless.
Exactly. And which is another, it's tough. It's tough to stay on top of it all.
No fun.
Scissors. You definitely want to have a pair of scissors in there. I have a pack of cards for entertainment. one thing that I didn't find on any of the lists that I came across, but this was something that I thought of and actually wrote on my dry erase board during the last emergency, was plastic sheeting. So I woke up in the middle of the night during the emergency and had this horrible premonition of trees crashing through windows. So what would you do then if a tree crashed through your window? You're gonna, and especially if it's cold, you're gonna wanna use some plastic sheeting to at least seal that up the best you can. In which case you should also have duct tape, which has disappeared from my kit, but is definitely a good thing to have in there. Some
Carolina,
more-
one thing about that, I would say, it will help after the event, but trying to put plastic up when wind and stuff is gonna happen will never help you. The better thing that you could do if you want to prepare for your home is maybe even think about cutting plywood in certain amount of manageable pieces and
Yeah.
having a drill and a screw gun nearby. And that way, if you really do have a window that breaks forth, again, that's a little bit larger, but what you're thinking about is a good idea, but that's the small Band-Aid. The real solution would be covering the hole that was just made in a realistic way.
That would be nice, but that's also very expensive. Where do you store the plywood? Having
Yeah.
access to it, having access to a drill, what if there's no power? So,
Exactly. Yep.
and I think a lot of us probably have a lot of windows also of differing shapes and sizes that does become a pretty complex project there.
Oh, yes.
I have some more food. These are called Big Franks, which are amazing vegetarian protein links that come in a can. Have just a wrench, a few tools in your kit. If you can't have a whole kit, it's great to have. Of course, a variety of candles. I have some toothbrushes, sort of travel toothbrushes. If you have to take the kit with you and don't grab your toothbrush, that's always nice to have, as well
Sure.
as some soap.
Got a can opener in there?
I
I
did
assume
at
you're gonna be,
one point.
your kitchen's probably gonna have one, but if you got an electric can opener and your power's out, make sure you got a can opener.
I had a multi-tool in here at some point, which has also disappeared. I have an emergency whistle, which has been life-saving, apparently, in many cases. If you get trapped underneath something, a tree falls on you, it's good to have, and you happen to have that with you, then that's a very good thing to have. I actually have a gas mask. Hopefully that will never have to come into use. Just a comb.
Gas masks. Since we're doing a public safety thing, I gotta call a gas mask out. Do you know what it's used for, how it's used, and what it's capable of?
No, I have absolutely no idea.
Then don't ever use it. Take it to the fire department, ask them what it's useful for, and then find out. Don't put a gas mask on and think you've saved for one thing and find out it's for another. You will die. There
Yeah,
are
actually,
different
Russ,
kinds of
so-
canisters and everything
Yes,
else.
exactly.
Please.
Oh,
Since
really?
this is a public safety thing,
Yeah,
I actually
because there's
Mine
do not
particulate,
advise-
there's organic vapor, there's different types, so it's a big deal.
It's a huge deal. I don't advise anybody putting a gas mask in, unfortunately or not, unless you specifically are trained for it.
Okay.
Sorry, Caroline. Doing good
That's
so
okay.
far.
I've had it for years, so.
Okay, good. Then I want you to throw it out even more, honestly.
I have some tweezers, some eye protection goggles. I do have some COVID tests. Thank you, Kurt. Just in case, for now, this seems like a good thing to have in my emergency kit.
That
One
makes
of-
me wonder if that has a shelf life.
I'm not sure about that.
Just make sure if you do have things in there that have containers and stuff, maybe a list with shelf lives, that's quick release is easy to find, as opposed to having to look it up everything. But if you make a kit bag and you have shelf lives, you should think about that.
I do agree with this, but I also think that it's better to have something rather than nothing, even if it is expired.
What we've learned in public safety, though, unfortunately or not, is we can only promote stuff that has a shelf life because we can't tell people in public that they could use it safely if it's expired. So we have to be careful with that. We can advise people to do whatever they like, but as
That
far
does
as a
make
public
sense.
safety service, We can
I'm
only
doing
make
more
sure
the-
that you keep it
The
up to date.
layman's realistic version.
Yes. So for example, I eat a nasty meal every year. I have several thousand meals ready to eat MREs in West Tisbury, and they are quote unquote lifetimeable. But every year I suffer through at least one horrendous meal to make sure I can cook and eat them. And I test that out every year.
Well, I did have some crazy glue, but apparently this is already gone and hardened and dried out. So that's not too great to have in the kit. So I think it would come in handy at times. They also recommend, just for a simple kit, is having a first aid kit, of course, which you can buy a ready-made one that you can stick in there and at least have something. They do recommend having a document protector or folder, preferably waterproof, hand sanitizer or wipes, which I did have in there at one point also, toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, floss, feminine hygiene products if applicable, the food and water, which we spoke of earlier, the manual can opener, some basic utensils, which I am lacking. I don't have any basic utensils in there, so that would be very helpful. Copies of important documents, such as insurance cards, immunization records, and have backup digital copies if possible. So it is good to take a picture of all those things as well. If you have any ongoing medical condition or serious medical conditions, paperwork about that, some extra cash, a physical map of the area, which would also be great to have in there, an actual printed map because you can't always rely on your phone, an extra set of car keys and house keys. That's kind of a tough one too, because you do have to usually pay to get an extra car key these days, and they are not cheap. At least a 3-day supply of all medicines. Also, that can be difficult because not everything is prescribed that far in advance where you have extra medicine that you can sacrifice for your kit. And that also comes up with it expiring over time if it's not used.
And some medications need to be refrigerated, which makes it even more complicated for some.
Yes, that does. They also recommend an emergency blanket if possible, hand warmers, light stick, a medical ID card if you have that. You also want to definitely check the expiration dates on things and make sure everything's functional. Replace food or supplies that have expired. Have it put somewhere where it is actually accessible to you in the case of an emergency. They do say also they recommend to know where the shutoffs in your house are. So how to shut off the electricity, how to shut off the gas if you have heating oil, where that shutoff is. The water shutoffs, also very important to know where those are.
Do you have an emergency contact list in there in case your phone is dead and you need to reach family members off island or anything like that?
I don't, because I'm sorry to say, I really don't know who I would call.
Ah.
I don't really have emergency contacts off island.
So that's okay. So this is a really, Caroline, let me take a point up then. This is a really good thing I like to talk about in the beginning with people to think. We are on an island, and oftentimes when we have family members that love us and want to talk about how we're good, how we're doing, we want to think about sometimes having somebody to contact to help. You have 2 wonderful children. It might be a constructive conversation to have with your family to who knows who's going to be your main contact off in case of emergency, who can be relied on. And that person then can also contact other people in your family to let them know that you're safe or that you're in need of help. But often really thinking about who your main contact off island is key. We all have to have a lifeline of sorts. And that might be a very good conversation to have with yourself over time to figure out who that person would be. But trying to establish that might be a very valuable resource for the future.
Well, I agree, but it is challenging for those of us who may not have very large extended families.
Me too. My mother is in Colorado. I don't really know exactly who, but I've tried to think about it very constructively. We all have to sometimes.
Another thing that I wanted to add into the kit is a pair of sunglasses. I have very sensitive eyes. Sunglasses would be a necessity for me to have should I have to go and take my kit somewhere else. Sturdy shoes and boots, another tough one to kind of keep in your kit because those are things that are difficult to have extra pairs of. Extra pair of glasses, hearing aids, anything that you would need for a pet, the food, the water, the vaccination records, the leashes, crates or carriers. A pocket knife, I think I mentioned a multi-tool would be very helpful. And in addition to the sunglasses, one thing that I did not see on, I don't think any of the lists that I found were sunscreen and bug spray, both of which come in very handy in an emergency, especially if you're stuck outside or for a long period of time. That's a necessity for me. I've added to my list binoculars. I guess that's something I felt like would be handy to have in there. And as far as a go bag's basically sort of a backpack or a duffel bag that contains most of the things in your emergency kit, just in a travel ready form, which you can keep in your car, ideally, so you have it with you in case of an emergency away from home. Again, my biggest challenge is the stuff's expensive. It's difficult to keep up with, to make sure everything stays fresh and safe. And it's difficult to keep your children out of. So if anybody has any suggestions or comments, let me know.
Carolina, thank you for doing that. I think it was so great for you to personalize the making of this and the thoughtfulness that you put into it. I think that's so much more valuable than just reading off a list or handing someone a list. To really hear the experience you've had with using it too is really valuable. So thank you for that. And I just want to mention too, there's some good comments in the chat box if anyone has a moment to look through those. So thank you so much.
Yes, sorry, I'm reading the chat right now. Yes, rain barrels I think are a great option if you can set those up and know how to do that. The only phone line working was our fax line, which is very interesting. Do you know why, Allison? Because we also have just landline phones at the library. Was it just because that the fax machine is plugged it directly into the wall and is not? I don't quite understand why that was the only one that worked at the library.
Might be your phone system was down and the fax wasn't.
This is actually probably more and more true of any organization or business that has switched over to Comcast's or Xfinity's like voice over IP protocol. So that requires electricity to run just like the internet does. When the electricity goes down and your internet server goes down, as a result, your phone line will no longer work. It's basically calling over the internet. And that's, you know, these phones that we have by our desks, they run off of the internet. The only phone line that remains in our building that's a traditional phone line is our fax line. And that may be true of lots of organizations. So this is more of a, you know, like you run a business or you run another organization that has that style phone system running through the whole building. Your only phone line right now might be your fax line, if you still have a fax machine, which we do. So we keep a dumb phone, you know, nearby that can plug directly into the wall. And the last time our power went out, we plugged the dumb phone into our fax line, because even the fax machine requires power to run. Like we couldn't even use the handset on it. So that's what we use to make outgoing calls to report the power outage. Like that's what we had to do.
And that's very, very interesting. I did not know that. That's great to know, because that's true. Most modern phones are not, they're through the internet. Everything's through the internet. And when the power goes down, the internet goes down. So yes, Kurt.
That would be worth mentioning is to keep a phone charger in your car, because you can always go to your car, start your car, and charge your phone or your iPad or whatever with a system from the car that has a charger in it. And that's actually what a lot of people would do, just to charge their phones.
That's true. That's a good point. Just make sure you're not charging your phone in your car, in your garage with the garage door down.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
You know, since we're
Allison,
all
also-
talking about that storm that happened in the fall, the one thing I wanted to mention about that storm is we all lost power for 3 or 4 days. But I just want everybody to think about what would happen if that was in February. We didn't have temperatures that
Exactly.
or in August when temperatures could have been on an extreme. We were very lucky for that storm to have it right when ideal temperatures were for living in a way. It got nippy, I think, one evening, but for the most part, if we were in a really blizzard condition type storm, we would have had thousands of homes on the vineyard that were really struggling, from freezing pipes to livable conditions. And I think that would have been a much bigger and more horrifying impact on the vineyard. I think for emergency management, we all got a little bit wider on how much we need the public to understand how much they need to be on their own for a little while and how resourceful they need to be in order to be able to maintain while we work out the systems that are here.
I think that's a great point. And actually, what would you do to stay warm if that did happen in February? What do you recommend?
Well, again, so we want you to think first about your long-term capabilities. Has everybody thought about what happens to their house if they should lose power for 5 days? If you haven't, that's the first step. Again, I can't tell you anything until you considered your own home. But what we do know is, from a public standpoint, we will open up warming shelters. We will protect yourselves as best we can. You'll see those pop up all over the place, libraries and all sorts of other public buildings. But I think the biggest concern will be the damage to the home, freezing pipes and other things that we can't prevent. And you're not going to get enough plumbers and however to drain your homes. So things like, looking at advanced warning. If it's really severe, should I even be here? Should I evacuate? Should I shut down my house? What should I do? Am I going to be part of the problem, or am I resilient enough to be here on my own and be able to handle it? Those are all the questions that we have to look at from many, many different perspectives to make sure that we're all effectively working together as an island during these very difficult times.
That is a good point. Another thing that happened particularly to me during that storm was a tree fell across my driveway, and I wouldn't have been able to leave because it was inaccessible.
Right. And that's too. So here's where I love what Aquinnah has with the CERT team. With that phone tree and a network with your neighbors, you could call your neighbor. They would have somebody who would volunteer with a chainsaw, come on over and help cut you out. So this is what we're going to try to do over the winter. We're going to look at this. We're going to try to unite a little bit more, come up with neighborhood call groups, come up with ways we can help each other keep informed and at least stay safe on that level. And then hopefully we can start to come up with ways we can help each other out to become more resilient. But that's a great example of how we can do a simple thing like a phone tree, where somebody who was trapped could have a resource very quickly that could get them freed up. But we need to have that set up ahead of time, not after.
Exactly. I think it's great to have that set up ahead of time. And actually what did happen was my neighbor runs a tree service, and he came over without even asking and did it. But if that hadn't happened, I think it would have been very difficult without having a tree, without having a phone tree and having a premeditated plan for me to feel comfortable asking somebody to do that for me. And, not everybody has the resources to pay to have this done when there's an emergency.
That's right. I hope that we see over a period of time the vineyard become more community involved with more weekly sessions of, again, extending neighborhood conversations around the town, having people over for coffee and getting your communities together, not just your friends together, but really talking about this stuff on a routine basis. You'll grow, you'll have people to talk to, and then you'll know who's around when you need them around. But we really got to start thinking that way on the vineyard and going around to our next door neighbors and saying hello and how can I help you and how could you help me? We've got to work on that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point.
This may seem like a minor point, but I'm so glad you mentioned headlamps, because they're so convenient to have, because you can see and you have your hands free, and you can do things with your free hands. And my sister also just gave me a hat that has a
Mhm.
lamp on it, which in the winter is going to come in very handy too. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yes, definitely. They sell those hats at Mardell's, by the way. I got one for my son too. They are really nifty. And also, Allison mentioned garbage bags. Of course, you do want to have garbage bags in your kit as well. And you can go online and find a bunch of different checklists if you want to have a checklist that you can go down and just check things off on your kit as you put it together. Does anybody else have any questions, comments, suggestions? All right, well, I guess we will wrap this up. Did you have something, Russ?
Change of clothes. I was trying not to, but I would say that if you were gonna have a go bag or a kit bag, make sure that you put a change of clothes in there so that you have something clean in case you don't have anything left.
Yes, definitely good to have that. All right, well, thank you everyone for joining us here today. I hope it's been helpful and informative and has given you some ideas of how to move forward and feel more confident in an emergency, because they are sort of inevitable and we are here on an island and have to be, as Russ said, resilient. So stay tuned, definitely watch Elizabeth and what is going to go on with the Martha's Vineyard Commission. It sounds like they have so many great events planned. So try to attend as many of those as you can and have a good day.
Thanks so much, Carolina, for organizing this.
Thank you,
you.
everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Carolina.
It was
Bye-bye.
great.